like a deep dark night. But follow me outside into the moonlight.
Welcome back to the Wild Rose Moon's Moonlight series featuring the talent that surrounds us all. Tonight we have Patty Shaffner joining us along with our host John Baylor. I am Ryan Meir. Off we go into the moonlight. John?
Welcome. Thank you very much for joining us. Tonight our guest is Patty Shaffner, and she's quite an accomplished everything, I think. She's a musician, a songwriter, very involved in musical theater as a performer and as a director as well. She's won awards for her songwriting as well as for her performing and directing. And we're going to try to get a few songs out of her tonight and get a little bit of her story as well. So thank you very much for joining us, Patty.
I'm so grateful to be here, John. Thank you.
And before we dive into the music, I want to learn just a little bit about your music. Where did you get started on this?
Well, if we go back long before I actually started getting paid for it,
Way back.
Way back. I started singing when I was about probably 3. My father loved to sing. He was an amazing vocalist, had this amazing baritone voice, and he taught me how to sing harmonies. He loved to do barbershop kinds of things, and he loved to sing the jazz. Particularly, he was fond of people like Hoagie Carmichael. So I grew up hearing those songs and learning to sing with him.
Yeah. Now, do you sing a lot of harmony these days?
I do, actually. I have a trio that I work with out of Chicago, the Song Sisters, Amy Dixon Kohler and Sue Fink. And even though we are from rather disparate areas, Amy in Fox River Grove and Sue in Chicago and myself in Gary, Indiana, we get together and we perform and we sing harmonies on one another's songs. And I'm the alto, and I let the other two fight over the soprano part.
Yeah. Well, I come from kind of a harmony singing background, but in my family, everybody sings harmony, so they always made me sing the lead, and I still learned a lot of harmony singing, but that was usually not the part I got stuck with. But do you find that the harmony singing influences you as a solo musician or as a lead singer?
As a lead singer, absolutely, because I love the harmonies of so many songs that I learned to sing, and I couldn't do both the harmony and the melody, so I often would find ways of performing the song that took a little bit from both.
Yeah, right.
You know? So if somebody came up to sing an Indigo Girls song with me, for example, they're like, "Well, you're not doing the melody." Well, you're right. I'm not.
Some of it.
I'm doing my own version of the melody.
I got all the good notes from the melody.
That's correct. You know what it is.
Right. So you mentioned singing at a very young age, and you said 3 years old.
Mm-hmm.
And when you're around like really young kids, then you realize you've been singing from the very beginning.
Oh yeah, and when I watch children, they have such abandon about that. They're aware of what they're doing. They're just doing it. You
Right.
know?
Yeah.
There's no worry about what am I doing or is anybody going to judge how I sound. They just do it.
Right. So so that's the singing history goes way back for you. When did you start adding an instrument into the mix?
I was in my teens when I started adding guitar and just learning to play things like Michael Row the Boat Ashore, and actually started writing my own songs at that point in time. Just little things, nothing complex, and singing with one of my friends from church at the time and doing harmonies with her as well.
Mm-hmm. And then when you start, well, you said you wanted to start before you got paid for it.
Yeah.
But when did you then start performing?
Well, I no, it was probably in the late 70s. I started doing some open mics, and my first open mic, I had to sit down because my knees were shaking so bad, and my voice was shaking, and my hands were shaking, and everything was shaking, and I didn't know how I was going to even make it through the first song. And kind of got hooked on doing open mics, and that was in Crown Point, Indiana, at a place called The Hideaway. And then a few years later, I had the opportunity to go start singing at the Court Restaurant in Valparaiso, Indiana, and that kind of launched my career from there because I
So
went from open mic.
Did you get hooked while shaking all over your
Even
body?
even that, yes, because the audience, they didn't care. They just liked that you were there, and they applauded whether they thought you did a poor job or whether they thought you did a good job. And I think I kind of got hooked on that,
Yeah, on the
energy
audience.
exchange between an audience
Right.
and a performer.
Yeah, right. Now, I would guess that that's still an important part of your music today.
It is, and in the times that we live in, it's certainly been more challenging, hasn't
Right.
it?
Yeah. There are some writers or songwriters or creative people who look at this as an opportunity of, now I'm just going to do a lot of work, do a lot of writing, write a lot of music. Is that are you able to be creative in that way during this time, or do you feel like I need to get that audience back before I can really do it again?
No, I've been able to be creative, and I don't know that it's because of COVID necessarily, but sometimes the processing that goes through our system as songwriters takes a while, and then they emerge. I listened to Megan McDonough the other night on a concert that my friend Sue Fink had, her virtual dream cafe, and Megan was on there, and she talked about sometimes that gift of a song that just sort of comes, right? So I've had more of those than I've had anything else in this last, what is it now? 7 months, 8 months? I've
Yeah,
lost track.
7, I guess.
It's
No,
been a
maybe not
while.
quite that long.
It's
yeah.
been a while, yeah.
Yeah. Well, I love to keep the conversation going, but I want to hear some music so we know
All right.
not only where it comes from, but just what it is
But
that
what
we're
it
looking
sounds
at.
like.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, so I'd like to actually open with a song that I don't know any of your viewers are familiar with Jenny Beneman. She's a singer-songwriter from Chicago. And she had a project that was her haiku project. And the haiku project was that she took photos and then wrote haikus to go with the photos over the course of 100 days and managed to get a grant from the Illinois Arts Commission and put together a book. And part of those funds went back to the Lighthouse for the Blind. Then she created an audio book so that people who did have no vision or low vision could actually appreciate the book. Then she didn't want to stop there. She decided to ask those of us that were singer-songwriters to write a song based on one of her haiku. So I went through her book and I picked out the haiku, "Forgive me for all the things I have left undone, beguiled by light and shadow." And I loved the haiku, and I thought, well, how can I put that together? How do light and shadow interplay to make a song? And I remembered a movie called Lady Hawk. And in Lady Hawk, it was Rutger Hauer and Michelle Pfeiffer and a very young Matthew Broderick. And the two lovers were cursed. And so during the day, he was a man and she a hawk. And during the evening or the night, he was a wolf and she a woman. And the only time that they got to meet was at dusk and dawn, in those very moments of transformation. And so that ended up being the basis for this song. And it's called Shadow and Light. be shadow, you be light. Meet me at dawn before the sun, just before the stars have gone, at the edges of our time. You and I live in different worlds, yet not so very far apart. You craft a pattern on my heart, dancing as we do together. Forgive me all I do not do, beguiled by you. Beguiled by you. You shine on even through the night, dressed in stars and pale moon, a constant brilliance in my dark. I could gaze at you forever. Forgive me all I do not do, beguiled by you. Beguiled by you. I'll be shadow, you be light. Meet me at dawn before the sun, just before the stars have gone, at the edges of our time together. Dancing as we do forever. Forgive me all I do not do, beguiled by you.
Very nice. Thank you for
Thank
sharing.
you, John. Thanks.
In that haiku, in the movie that you reference, and then in the song, of course, there's an uncertain space that surrounds all of it, and yet there's this, I don't know, maybe magic moment you could say, in the relationship. That's a small window that opens up.
Yeah.
Why is it you're drawn to that theme? Why that haiku, and why that movie, and why does it come out into that song?
Well, the movie was always one of those kind of fun movies for my husband and I. Just the most terrible soundtrack ever, but it was just this fun concept of lovers who were constantly separated by this curse, but yet they stayed connected and found ways to be together, and ultimately, of course, they triumph and are together. But I suppose the concept of light and shadow for me has always been fascinating. I'm also a visual artist, and so I love how shadow plays with light, and you can't have one without the other. And isn't that the way with a lot of relationships too? You can't have a relationship with someone without understanding that it's not all the happiness and light all the time, that
Right.
there are those darker moments, and yet somehow you stay connected.
Well, I mean, darker moments may be part of it, but it sounds like a lot of it is there's a whole mystery to who that person is that you don't have access to.
There's that too, yeah. That's for a lot of people. That's that mystery is what kind of keeps you intrigued or
Right,
connected,
yeah.
doesn't it?
Yeah. It sounds like, to me, it just looked like yin and yang imagery, especially when you get to the verse that's describing, even in my darkness, you're there, in the stars, in the moonlight, the light is still present in that night.
Right. Yeah, that there you are. And it ended up ultimately kind of becoming a song about the relationship that I now have with my husband, who had passed on a year and a half ago. And so that relationship continues, even though he's gone from this realm. He stays connected to me in ways that are so difficult to explain to anyone, but that song expresses that.
Yeah. You had this sort of scat singing or this vocal. I don't know if that's improvisation or if that's kind of a scripted break that you take in there. But tell me a little bit about the style and what it means in that song.
Oh, of doing that sort of improvisational?
Yeah.
I actually have been very fortunate in that I took a workshop with Bobby McFerrin and then went on to do a master class with Rhiannon, who is one of his singers that still works with him. And it was about improvisational singing, and I've always loved to do scat when I do jazz singing, and so I started to introduce that into my songwriting, even those songs that aren't necessarily jazz,
Right.
because it felt more expressive than just going ooh, ooh or la la or woo woo or those things that we typically do.
So what is it you feel you're expressing in that moment?
I guess it's it's a way of emoting, of expressing the love without having words to say. It's this yearning. There you go. That's what it is. It's the yearning for the connection.
Right. We've in past episodes we've talked about the danger of explaining the meaning of something, of explaining the meaning of the song. When you put it into words, then you sort of killed it. It means less than it did before you explained it. And in a sense, when you say it's doing what you can't put into words, it's almost like saying that same thing about this vocal moment is, if you try to explain it, then you ruin the whole thing.
I've always loved poetry, and maybe that's why I ended up as a songwriter. And one of the things about poetry that I loved was that I am open. It's always open to my interpretation, and so I always hope that even though the song may be very personal for me, that someone else can listen to my song, and for them it connects to something that's important for them, and then I don't have to tell them what it's about.
Yeah, right. Yeah, and I mean, like explaining a joke or something, it's like
Yes.
the explanation kills the whole thing.
I'm sorry,
that
it's
you're
not
aiming at.
funny anymore.
Right. But that also connects to that idea of this uncertain space in that song. It's this uncertain space that surrounds a relationship, and I think I felt some of the same uncertain space in the other song that you mentioned you wanted to play in this set, which was "Dancing on the Edge."
Oh, Dancing on the Edge, yeah.
And so you may say a few words about that, but for me, I think we're still going to be working with uncertainty in this one.
Dancing on the Edge, as one of the things we don't talk about a whole lot in our culture is grief, and especially in this year so many people are experiencing grief in huge ways, as well as that sense of isolation and separation, and, if you will, a kind of global grief that we're all going through. And so this song was, for me, about coming to a realization of just how different my life is now, and standing in those moments between what's in front of me and how I want to proceed in my life, and what's behind me and what's forced on me in the moment. And one of those things that's forced is that we have this plexiglass between us, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, we're separated from people by masks and plexiglass and distance and different kind of isolation. So it's about looking at all of those choices that you have. You know, are you going to go boldly into your future, or are you going to, you know, shy back into your past?
Mm-hmm.
Which way are you going to go? So that's what this one's about. For me. So, yeah, dancing on the edge. Dancing on the edge, waiting to go home. Dancing on the edge, dancing all alone. I'm dancing on the edge of every truth and lie that I've ever told. Dancing on the edge of every love that ever left me cold. I'm dancing on the edge. Dancing on the edge, standing in between, dancing on the edge, hoping to be seen. I'm dancing on the edge without a witness there to watch me fall, dancing on the edge without another soul to hear me call that I'm dancing on the edge. Step one way or the other and you might be lost. Better keep your balance or you'll pay the cost of dancing on the edge. Ooh, ooh, ooh. Dancing on the edge, waiting for a sign. Dancing on the edge, which one is mine? I'm dancing on the edge where I can see myself looking back at me. I'm dancing on the edge where all I need are wings to set me free from dancing on the edge. Step one way or the other and you might be lost. You gotta keep your balance or you'll pay the cost of dancing on the edge. Dancing on the edge, waiting for a train. Dancing on the edge, oboe heart is the refrain. I'm dancing on the edge of traveling by myself to the other side. Dancing on the edge to where this heart of mine can no longer hide from dancing on the edge. I'm dancing on the edge to where this heart of mine can no longer hide. Thank you.
Beautiful.
Very nice. Thanks again for sharing.
Thanks.
You mentioned that you did your scat singing in styles that were not necessarily jazz songs, but there seems like there's a lot of jazz in both of the songs that you've played so far. What would you call those in terms of the style of the music?
Wow. I've struggled with this because, it's so hard to put some of these things into a genre or a box. That's why I end up calling myself a singer-songwriter or an acoustic performer when I'm doing me and my guitar. But given the opportunity to put me in front of a jazz band, and I'm as happy as can be. So I've been very strongly influenced by the jazz performers. I've written a couple of songs that they could be loosely construed as jazz.
Yeah. Well, you've got you've always got like a money chord in your song somewhere that's something a little different than what you would have expected it to be. And then just listening to the vocal of it, then I hear it as a jazz singer, and not as a folk singer. Although somebody else might take it in a different direction.
Well, it's true. And with my song sisters, Amy is very traditional. Sue is very typically quirky and funny, and I kind of bring the jazz. And so it does make for a very interesting trio when we come together because we do have such varied styles.
Yeah,
keeps it interesting.
Right. Now you mentioned some of that style coming from your father being a fan of jazz music. What are some other things that have really shaped what we heard so far?
Wow. Joni Mitchell, and if you actually are a fan of Joni and you've listened to a lot of her music, so much of her music was strongly influenced by jazz. And so I used to do a lot of Joni's tunes and would be compared with Joni. Sometimes with some of my choices of phrasing or my choices of chords. So she was a strong influence when I was learning to write songs as well.
Right.
And you called it the money chord. I've never heard it called that before, but that's lovely. I like that because I hear voicings in my head, and I may not necessarily know the name of the chord, but I can say, oh, well, if I do that, I like that. What does that take me? Where does that take me melodically? So it takes me different directions melodically as well.
Right. So you have that the instrumentation before you have a melody on top of it. Then
not always. Like all singers, songwriters, or all songwriters, I shouldn't make that generalization. Like many singers, songwriters, sometimes words will come, a phrase, and you write that down, and it's a nugget that maybe sits there for 6 months or 6 years, and you go back to it and go, oh, yeah, there was that. I should write a song around that. Sometimes there's a whole concept that comes out, and sometimes it's me playing around on the guitar, and then I go, ooh, what does this sound like?
Right.
What's the mood here?
Yeah.
So...
Well, I think we'll jump back into this conversation when we come
Sure.
back. We'll take a short break, grab yourself a snack, and come right back because in half an hour we'll be up again. And we got a couple more songs and a little bit of discussion on songwriting and on everything else.
Awesome.
But thank you, Patty. It's been great so far.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody, for watching another episode of the Moonlight series. We will be back with Patty Shaffner. Got to mention our sponsors that make all this possible. The Gibson Foundation, Gibson Insurance, Marshall County Community Foundation, Marshall County Tourism, and Encore Performing Arts Center. Thank you, and we'll be back not soon enough.